Sin City è un posto in cui entri tenendo gli occhi aperti.
Turn fantasy elements into real ones. However, in Sin City, we can say it's the opposite. You worked on this project. How was it?
How was the project? Well, it was very different from me. It's something that I had not done before, and that's why it was really interesting. And because usually we create characters or we create something in the foreground, and this was really just creating everything behind the actors because it was all shot on green screen. So it was definitely interesting because it really much went into design, production design, set decoration, and all those elements that we usually don't get to do in visual effects. So that's why it was interesting to me. I liked the first film very much. It was a very interesting film. So when they approached me to come on as a consultant to do this film, I thought, oh yeah, this is something I haven't done before, so that made it very interesting for me.
Come ci sono arrivato qui?
Frank Miller's visual guidance and Robert Rodriguez's creativity. How did these two aspects influence your work on Sin Cities with visual effects?
Well, of course, we had to match Frank Miller's graphic novel style. However, it's entirely black and white, and there's essentially only black and white. That means either something is entirely black or something is entirely white. So it makes for great two-dimensional drawings, two-dimensional shapes, but of course we're making a three-dimensional movie, especially also a stereo movie, so you had to translate his style of graphic novel into this film. And if you can imagine, if you've seen the graphic novels, if you imagine a whole movie, even if you have live actors and all of that, in that style, it wouldn't be satisfactory. After a while, I think it would really wear you out very quickly if it was just that black and white. So we added a lot more shading and dimension, and also gave it a lot more scale in terms of depth and the dimension of the room. So it was essentially taking that style, interpreting that style. Every once in a while in the film we actually went to just sort of the black and white silhouettes here and there, but not too often. And we also introduced color elements here and there to accent, very much like the first film.
From a technical point of view, how did you create Sin City's look?
Well, technically, it wasn't that difficult of a film to make in that sense, or visual effects to make, because, as I always say, we could have done this with the technology from 20 years ago. So the challenge was much more just creatively, and there was fairly little guidance by the filmmakers. By the time I got involved in the project, Robert Rodriguez had already moved on and done Machete Kills, another movie, and then he moved on to making 2 of his television series for his new network, El Rey. So we were given a lot of freedom just by the fact that he didn't have really that much time to concentrate on this particular film. So we had a lot of freedom, and I would basically create things very much without his guidance, initially show them to him and then see what he said. So that's kind of what he expected. He really expected me to creatively show something to him without telling me exactly what he wanted. And that was more freedom than we usually have as a visual effects artist. And it took a little while to get used to, but I quickly sort of understood that that's what he wanted.
Stavolta hanno passato il limite.
What can you tell us about your experience and your difficulties with the HBO series?
I actually only worked on one season, the second season, because and I did some location photography. It's certainly a very interesting series, and I like it very much. And I've worked a little bit in television, but it's also very different from film. And so I like the fact that even with the lower budget, you can give us something on the screen, on the television, that really looks like almost a piece of a movie. So I think it's very impressive what they're doing with a much more limited budget.
In the past, you also worked on 2 important movies like Terminator 2 and Jurassic Park. Has the way of working on visual effects changed? How? And what do you expect for the future?
Well, my way of working in visual effects started that I used to be an artist who would sit at the computer and write the shaders. For instance, for Terminator 2, I was able to create the look of the liquid metal, the way it's shaded and the quality it looks. So I used to be there doing all that work myself, and then slowly I transitioned into the supervisory role where I really just told other people what to do. So, which, you know, but then you're looking at 200-300 shots every day, and so it's a different, but you know, it's a different way of working. Of course, I understand the technology very well because of my training. I have a degree in computer science. I used to be a programmer, and yet now sometimes I feel a little bit sad about not being able to sit down and actually doing it myself. But at some point, you have to be able to delegate, and I enjoy working with different artists and figuring out what their personality is, the way they work, and then best give them direction. So I think it was a very natural progression within my 15.5 years at Industrial Light and Magic that I spent there working on all these various projects. In the beginning, it was also very much that we were asked to do things that had never been done before. You know, Terminator 2, Jurassic Park, Twister, nobody had ever done tornadoes before, A Perfect Storm, nobody had ever done water simulations in a big ocean, to create all this. So those were sort of the pioneering days, as I call them, and the days where you didn't even know at the beginning of the project if you could actually do it. And I think that has changed now. Now it seems that, you know, studios want you to do more for less money and less time. And so it's gotten a little bit different. And I often tell young people who get into this business that, you know, it's not, to me, it's not as much fun as it used to be because the adventure isn't quite there anymore, or the challenges are different, you know.
You worked with two visionary directors like Steven Spielberg, James Cameron, and now Robert Rodriguez. How much is important the director's personality for the success of visual effects, and how can it motivate you?
Well, the relationship with the director is indeed very, you know, important because it's a collaboration. And I've worked with some directors who did not have a very, you know, good understanding of visual effects because I'd never used them. And yet, so part of my work is also to make sure that the director understands what we're doing, what is possible, what's not possible. And that's why I'm usually involved on most projects in pre-production, when the project is being planned, then when we go on location or on the set, wherever we film it, and then in post-production. So essentially, I've been on a lot of films where I'm right at the beginning and right at the end, which not too many people are there. I mean, the editors don't really start until the filming is there. The director of photography is, you know, prepping the film, shooting it, but then, you know, only comes back later on to do the DI. So as a visual effects supervisor, if you start right at the beginning of a project, you actually are on it for quite a long time, maybe a year and a half or so to see it all the way through. And different directors have different relationships with visual effects. You know, they all know they have to use it, or it's now become pretty much something you have to do. Some don't like it as much as others, but I usually want to make the director feel safe, that everything is going to be good, everything is going to work out. And so it's kind of interesting because, you know, teaching somebody, even though they're very experienced directors, for instance, Lawrence Kasdan, with whom I did Dreamcatcher, had, you know, written the Star Wars movies, he'd done Body Heat and a lot of really great films, and yet he was completely new to visual effects. And so that is an interesting relationship because he really needed my guidance. And, you know, when you have, and now that I'm starting to work with younger directors than myself, that also plays into it, where you kind of have a role to make them understand what we're doing and also feel good about it going to work out.
Mai perdere il controllo. Mai far uscire il mostro.